Hello everyone, welcome to the Narcissism Decoder. I'm Dr. Anthony Mazzella. On this channel, we go beyond labels and symptoms to explore the inner, often unconscious, emotional world behind narcissistic and related personality patterns. In these short clips from the full podcast, you'll get a clear, compassionate, psychodynamic insight into behavior. Whether intense feelings live in you or you're watching them in someone you care about, the goal is the same: to understand what's really going on with the emotions and approach them with perspective, compassion, and room to breathe. Here's a short clip from the podcast that highlights what this looks like in real life. Hello everyone, welcome to the Narcissism Decoder. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Mazzella. Today, I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Kerry, host of the Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse podcast. We're incredibly lucky to have her with us today because she understands the dynamics of being in and surviving a toxic narcissistic relationship. Dr. Kerry has the clinical lens to make sense of what happens psychologically and the lived experience to speak to the emotional truth of what's going on inside the relationship. So thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome, Dr. Kerry.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate this.
Yes, of course. And for my listeners, you may know I released an episode a little bit earlier. Dr. Kerry and I had a chance to meet and discuss some of these narcissistic dynamics on her podcast. So today we're going to talk about your experience with a man who, as I heard you describe on your own podcast, was probably what you called a narcissistic psychopath. And it's a complicated and really quite disturbing story, but maybe we could start at the very beginning. What was it about this man or about this relationship, or maybe it was something where you were emotionally at that time that drew you into it?
Yeah, I think you even have to pull the lens even back further. As I
Oh,
grew up
okay.
in a home with personality types. I grew up in a larger family system that had several people that were quite psychologically ill. So I grew up with a lot of gaslighting, triangulation, and I was, in fact, the scapegoat of the family. Because one of the things that wasn't understood at the time was I was autistic. So in the 1960s and 70s, autism made the DSM-3 in 1980. There was very little understanding of what it was prior to that, and certainly not seen as women suffering from that.
Yeah.
So here I am, an autistic woman in a complex family system.
Yeah, that's what I was just wondering. Again, this is in hindsight. Like right now, you're just enamored by him.
Yes.
Although you are sensing, right, that there may be these narcissistic traits, but I guess in your mind, you said you didn't know about the abusive piece,
Right.
but the part that you were more interested in, or that was more enticing, was what? The allure of it, I guess, right? The compliments that he
feeling
seemed.
chosen,
Yeah.
feeling chosen, feeling special, feels really wonderful. I mean, if you think about the loss that I just suffered, the fact that my now youngest child has left home, all my kids have left home. I've closed my practice because I had to take care of my husband. I'm now not in the state of mind to go back and practice.
Yes.
And here's the other thing I don't talk a lot about, but as an autistic woman doing psychotherapy, it was extraordinarily exhausting. The focus I can't not hyper focus. So when I'm with a client, my concentration is wholly with that person in a way probably maybe most people don't. I don't know what it feels like to be another person, but at the end, I'm a huge introvert. By the end of the day, my skin would hurt. We'd be so exhausted by the level of intensity of the work that I did with 6 people in a day that I wouldn't want to see anybody else. I was burning out of the job because of that. So I retired, but I also didn't want to return to work that way. I wanted to work in a different way. I love psychology. I didn't want to leave psychology behind, but I wanted to sort of preserve, not to feel so so drained by the job. So I needed to do something different. I probably would have been better as an instructor, been a professor or something, but I realized that too late. So here I am. I'm not working. I don't really have a good purpose. I'm not raising kids anymore because the last one just left home. We're all grieving. And I hadn't realized the role that my late husband had played by being sort of the centerpiece of the family. I didn't realize he was the center pin of the family. So we're shattered now. We're trying to find a new way to redefine ourselves. So I'm losing connection with my kids. And I've lost, for me, when I met my late husband way back in 19, I felt like I came home. So I didn't really have a home prior to him. And then he was this incredibly stabilizing force for me. So I lost that on top of it. So now picture this person who comes into my life. He's dynamic. He's confident. He's offering control, feels stable. So he's coming. I'm going to take over. I want to rescue you. I want to help you make your life easier. Now, that's, if you look back, that's coercive control because he's essentially taking over. But it felt like stability, like I'm finding a new foundation.
Yes.
And he seems interesting. You know, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of people that you meet, a lot of men, unfortunately, that you meet are not very emotionally intelligent. And so they don't really show up and they don't really know how to share who they are as a person. And I'm used to doing that professionally, but also socially. And then I meet this person who, at a surface level, seems quite thoughtful.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it was really actually only, a millimeter deep, not,
Yes.
because they're
Yeah.
very good at impressions, very good at image management. And so when I met him, it was like, wow, I've never met somebody who's ticking all the boxes, because the future faking is incredible to hear somebody wants to future with you, but they're also reconstructing a past to align with you. So you feel like, oh, well, we have a lot in common, when they really actually don't. And then on top of it, they're creating a moment with you feels extra special. So they've really created this sense of this world that you step into with them that is a really incredible experience.
Yeah. Let me just pick up on a few things in case I'm not so good at holding too many things in mind at once as we get too deep. So let me just reflect for a moment. So I think this is like an important learning point for anyone listening, because one thing that I hear you saying is a couple of things, actually. When starting a new relationship, it's really important to think about your own state of mind, where you are, your sense of identity, all of what's going on inside of you emotionally at that moment, because that's going to influence, there's no doubt, who you pick as your partner, right? Because you're now seeing through a certain lens, or there's a level of vulnerability as well. I think I heard that too.
Right.
And this is something I hear commonly discussed in the literature, that narcissists go after a certain type of personality, and then they try to match up different personalities that do well with narcissists. And in my own experience, what I discovered is any personality is fine for the narcissist, as long as there's a level of vulnerability and receptivity to step into a world, right? We'll name that world in a moment as we get deeper, but for right now, we could say it's an illusion or a fantasy of some sort, right?
Right.
So that's one thing that I'm hearing, and that's sort of a cautionary note. And the other thing is, building a real relationship takes time.
Yes.
Right. So you said he disclosed quite a bit initially. And even though you were a little bit curious and said, people come into my private practice where they pay me a lot of money to do this sort of thing, they don't even necessarily do it because there's a natural unfolding in a relationship. And when that doesn't happen slowly over time, again, something else that I hate to call it a red flag, but just something to be mindful of.
That's right.
Okay. But at this moment, from what we're describing, everything seems to be a good fit, right? So this is like a good fit. You're like really pumped up. You're excited that you met this man, even though he has some of these traits. It's kind of like, well, this could work for me at this point in my life. Then I imagine as you get deeper into the relationship, which I don't know, maybe you could give us some time frame, like how long, and did you start to then recognize things that became concerning, rather than endearing? Maybe it's even the same things, by the way, that you noticed, but they're no longer so enticing, but they're more concerning.
Yeah, it happened really quite fast, and that's the part that I feel some shame around, is that I saw red flags pretty swiftly, and I was so desperate to recreate the relationship that I'd lost that I was willing to overlook them without really realizing what I was seeing. There was an incredible level of naivete here. In fact, one of the things he loved to say about me, if I asked him, why do you love me? He'd say, you're without malice. Now, one thing I need to say is English was his second language, so he didn't always use words that we would typically use. I think if to interpret that, he was saying you're gullible. I think that's actually what he was saying, unfortunately, that he liked my gullibility, the fact that I was a literal thinker and I wasn't challenging his ulterior motives. And I would really urge people to ask themselves, what else might you gain here by doing this? I wasn't asking those questions.
Yeah, and if someone says something and you're sensing it meant something else, right? Also, you can question the person, right? Like, what is it that you mean when you say this, right?
Right.
Because they don't necessarily know. And by the way, Dr. Kerry, I think you know this. I do work with these individuals directly, quite a bit of them. They don't even know at the conscious level what they're saying, or the way it could be so devaluing until you push them a little bit further, and they could say something like, oh, I think you're so cute. That's what I mean by it. Like that's a cute characteristic to have. But then you have to help them realize, can it also be interpreted in another way, like condescending or critical or judgmental or diminishing them? Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the other thing that I picked up, I was sensing, because I read people. It's interesting. I'm a literal thinker in the sense of, but I'm abstract, but I take things literally when I hear it. So if you say strike the way the iron's hot, I tend to see the iron in my head and then reinterpret it in the abstract way. So that's one of my grids that I got to constantly push through. But I also was sensing, because I'm very empathic and reading the room, especially growing up in a predatory home,
Yes.
that there was something dangerous here. And what I could tell, and this is another really good point that you're making, Dr. Mazzella, is that if I was to challenge him like you were suggesting, it would have gone poorly. And that's a problem. The fact that I was already aware that there were limits in the relationship. But I also was sensing, because I'm very empathic and reading the room, especially growing up in a predatory home,
Yes.
that there was something dangerous here. And what could tell, and this is another really good point that you're making, Dr. Mazzella, is that if I was to have challenged him like you were suggesting, it would have gone poorly. And that's a problem. The fact that I was already aware that there were limits in the relationship. Don't cross this with this person. There's not this sense of support and safety. I
Yeah.
should have seen that as very serious.
Yes.
And I didn't. I just thought, because I was used to it, I ended up then not seeing it as seriously as today that I would see it.
But there was a point, I would imagine, where you started to see things more seriously, like the way you're describing right now. Am I right about that? Like,
Yeah, but some of it was the cognitive dissonance, and I know that you mentioned off air. We'd like to talk
yes.
about that. Was already present. Here's how it showed up as present, and I didn't know what it meant. I met him I met him in late August, and now it's October, so short period of time.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
already had enough suspicion about him that I hired a private investigator to run a background check on him. I actually hired a person to do an analysis of his data print in the world to see if it's, because my question for the PI was, is he really divorced like he says he is? Because I didn't believe him. Now, why didn't I believe him? I don't know why. I can't, even today, I cannot tell you why I didn't believe him. But there was an uneasiness, a restlessness I was feeling, like something's not adding up. I don't know what it is, but something's wrong here. I could feel that, but I also thought, and I'm really in love with him. I had both at the simultaneous time, and I didn't realize that was the start of cognitive dissonance.
So at what point then? I mean, because eventually the relationship came to an end, right? Was there a turning point? Was it just several moments, or was it one
No, it
moment?
was catastrophic. The way it blew
Oh,
up was catastrophic, and it was. So what happened was I didn't know. There were signs something's wrong. It wasn't adding up, but I wasn't adding them up. And then we ended up getting married, and we had two marriages: a courthouse marriage because we were getting ready to move to Mexico, and I needed my visa process to move forward. So I needed the marriage to happen so I could go into the consulate here in the United States to apply for a visa to live in Mexico. He's Mexican, but he was living in the United States, but we wanted to go there to run a vacation rental business, which was my idea, not his. He didn't put me up to that. But I think a lot of things fell into his direction that was very providential. That gave him enormous amount of power for me to do that inadvertently. So we're working on all of this, buying property to start a rental business, which had been a dream of mine, something even my late husband had encouraged me to do. So again, I want to hear it wasn't my ex's idea. So we're doing that, but then we have a second marriage with family and friends, and then a delayed honeymoon. So all of that goes well. He loses his job, which is really odd. I don't understand why, and he's not telling me. It doesn't make sense, but I trust him.
wait, pause
Getting
there,
ready
pause
to-
there for 1 second, 1 second.
Yeah, yeah.
What about the private investigator? What did he
Oh, he
end up
came back
telling
and
you?
said, yeah, he came back and said, it looks like he's not, I can't tell if he's not married, but I can tell you that he's not living with anyone. He is living in a home that's running on a utility for one person. But I
Okay,
can't,
so at that
by the
moment,
way, I did find out he was married. Yes, he was married.
so the private investigator though gives you no negative feedback. In other
Right,
words, he doesn't confront any sort of
right. Red
suspicions. I
flags.
mean, or, not confront, but validate any. Okay,
Correct.
suspicions you had, but then you have this other suspicion again. That's what made me think of the private investigator. So
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, so I do find out just a few days before we get married that he's married. And he's applying for a quickie divorce. And we go ahead and get married anyway. And because all the balls rolling to moving, selling the house, selling the car, buying property in Mexico. And I'm mid now this big transition. So you have to understand that too. Is
oh
that they
no,
love these
no. So
types
you
of
find
things.
out, so you find out this information, but because like the wheel is in motion,
Yes.
you feel what at this moment? Like some pressure to keep moving forward with
Well, I
it, or
still love him, and I don't know that it's a really glaring flag that he lied so profoundly. I mean, he has an excuse. I don't buy the excuse, but on the other hand, I just didn't see it as enough to stop.
I see.
Because here's the other problem, like I'm doing a character analysis of myself, is that I, prior to this relationship, didn't feel complete unless I was in a relationship.
Yeah.
The we made me better and made me okay,
Yeah, thank you
stabilized
for
me.
saying that. I really appreciate you saying that because
Yeah, and
again, in
now
the
that's not
literature,
true.
so
Yeah,
you know, that's something that's so commonly debated again in the
yeah,
literature when people are going after these narcissistically disturbed people. It's so underappreciated what you just said, which is not there was a sense of vulnerability, which we spoke about earlier, but now a sense of completion, right? That
yes,
this fellow completed you.
yes,
So now you have a
yes.
very different type of relationship, right? Because it's almost like you not intentionally or maybe unaware, I don't know how to what extent this was conscious, but you're externalizing your sense of self, right?
Yes,
Your
and my sense
identity,
of
your
safety too.
self-esteem. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's still so much more to explore about this topic and related dynamics. If you're finding this discussion helpful and you want to learn more about the various facets of narcissism and related personality organizations, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video clip. If you want to do an even deeper dive, check out my podcast. I go into far more detail there. Okay, until next time, take care of yourself. Bye for now.